Again, I always think of this movie as like almost two different halves. Like this is what really happened, and then like what was about to happen. So if like T'Challa was never actually, if T'Challa was still alive and he was the Black Panther for the story, do you think Killmonger would have still been the person he saw? How would they have introduced a black? So Black Panther, one of his powers is that he can talk to the dead. He is one of his monikers in Marvel Comics is King of the Dead, because he has access to all the previous knowledge and powers of any other the Black Panthers who've ever lived. And so there's even times when he's like summoning the dead or like communicating with the dead. It's part of the Black Panther power. Not really touched on in the Marvel Cinematic Universe so much. It's more of like this is our exposition fill or like how you talk to the past characters. Kind of like the Force Ghosts in Star Wars. Like it's really a narrative situation, like when it really needs to happen. But do you think that Killmonger would have still been the person he talked to? How it like what would have introduced that? I mean, obviously he probably would have just
I
had a
definitely
meditation
I don't
thing or
know
something.
how and all of that, but I know for sure that Killmonger was gonna be in that movie because
You knew,
there's an
yeah.
unspoken rule that Ryan Coogler and Michael B. Jordan are always together in all
Also,
movies.
it was definitely in the cast listing. Like, oh yeah, Michael B. Jordan's gonna be in this movie. He's gonna revise his role as Killmonger. So I was always like, I wonder how they're gonna do that. Like, he's dead, so that means they have to use the
It
heart.
reminded me of the scene from The Godfather when Godfather 2 when Sonny was brought back in a dinner scene, if y'all remember.
Oh
The
yeah.
brother he died in the first
Oh
movie when
yeah,
they brought him back like as a memory scene. And I remember
right.
like he negotiated to be paid the exact same amount that he got paid in the first movie just for that one scene in the second
oh
movie.
wow,
Wow.
that's pretty
Yeah.
cool. I did not know
Yeah.
that. I think if Killmonger had won in the first movie and he had actually killed T'Challa, and taken over Wakanda, and I think that as soon as Namor had met him, they would have teamed up immediately, and I think that's the real issue. I want you to marinate on that while that's cooking. I want you to also think about this is the last movie in Phase 4. I think up until this point, here's my prediction, by the way. I think up until this point, um, Marvel has done a good job of walking us through the multiverse and like alternate timelines. But I think Phase 5 is where they're like, good luck, y'all. Have a good. They're gonna push us right off the boat, and we're gonna be sprawling through it. The next movie is Quantum Mania.
That's right.
Yeah. And by the way, Eddie worked on it. He's like
It's got to be bonkers. It just has to be bonkers. There's no way that movie is not about to take us for a massive spiral. So, with the massive spiral being, who can you trust? Because the scrolls are here. The Skull Invasion is happening. Like that's about to go down. Secret Wars, Secret Invasion, Secret Wars. That's about to go down. I think that Namor still being alive and being an ally. He literally tells you his plan at the end of the movie. He is like, "Oh yeah, I just challenged the strongest nation in the world. We lost, but we're still here, having crazy strong strength still. And now when the world wants to fight them, they're gonna call us for help, and that's when we'll strike again. Like Namor is now the bad guy, the resident bad guy who's on campus. Like we have a bad guy who's resident now. It's easy for the comics to get away with this. Magneto escaped, and so he'll do a thing later. Like that's not really what happens in these movies, because movies we want closure as an audience, and so the Ultron is killed, or like Thanos gets his head cut off. Like we get this closure, but like they have a bad boy on campus now, and he's just floating around, literally floating around, literally floating around. Like it's pretty exciting that they can just now be like, oh, well, actually, here's a villain or two. Take these,
Right.
because they can never really do that. Like if you have to create a bunch of villains, it's kind of awkward. You don't really care.
I wanted to ask y'all, how did y'all feel like it's kind of like Eddie, you talked about it a little bit, of the transition from the beginning of the movie to the middle of it. I feel that there was a big shift in the style. I think maybe because they ran out of time. Because when you're on set at the beginning, you put all of your effort at the beginning of the early scenes, but then you notice that, oh, I'm running out of time. So you kind of like wrap up quickly towards the end. So I feel like they spend a lot of time on the early scenes and they were a little bit too extended. Like I remember the scene at the lake when the Namor comes up, so all of a sudden I got bored a little bit before he all of a sudden jumped up. I felt that the scene was fleshed out too much. So how did y'all feel like of the transition going on? I think you could go first and then Mike.
I wasn't really like I definitely felt like because it's a long film that there were slower moments, but as far as the first to the beginning, like beginning to the middle, excuse me, the transition wasn't that crazy to me. I think adding is it IronHeart? She yeah, I think
Ironheart.
adding her was, and I get why they used her as like a story point to kind of have like, no more, this is who I'm gonna kill. She just felt out of place to me a little bit,
Yeah.
because her obviously she wasn't fleshed out either. And again, I think it just suffers from too many characters. But so when we went into that middle part and then like shifted into her, that kind of threw me off a little bit in terms of like the pacing. But otherwise, I didn't feel it too dramatically. I was so focused on like what was going on and trying to follow every thread that was happening. So
Ironheart is definitely a character who isn't really doing much for the plot.
right.
She's
Passive.
following Shuri along, but like the only reason no one can be mad at her is because like everything she's saying and doing is like the rational reaction. But you're just taking the regular person and putting them in the superhero world. And so they're just like, this is crazy dangerous. And it is, but like, that's what superheroes do. Or this is not cool. And it's not, but that's what superheroes do. Like, they're just the ones stating all the obvious things. But like, you're like, oh no, they're right. Like, this is crazy. Like, this is not cool. So she didn't really do much for me. Also, like, the first Ironheart suit is cringy. I don't know what to tell y'all. It looks bad,
Yeah.
dude. I look at CGI very heavily when I look at these shows and these movies, and I'm like, dude, this looks not good. Like Black Panther, the first one, like that fight scene between him and Killmonger, some of those shots were not good.
They were
not. That's why it's a 9. I was like, these are jarringly, uncomfortably floppy Play-Doh physics, and I don't like
surprising.
it. Surprising, but like, because then there'll be other shots of like Shuri walk. Oh, dude, some of these shots of Shuri Black Panther CGI is incredible. Incredible shots. Like stuff is glistening. There's like water droplets on some parts of the armor where she like splashed a puddle earlier. Like it just looks good. Like you're like, that's incredible. There's so much effort. And other times I'm just like, like it just looks goofy. Pacing. It's 2 hour and 45 minute movie. It's a long movie. I think that the beginning sets up a lot of like, it is a lot of setup. Like a lot. But I mean, how do you kill off Black Panther? If I would have asked you that before this movie started, like, how do you kill off Black Panther and set up the rest of this movie? And how much time do you dedicate to the death of Black Panther while setting up this movie? Oh, caveat, you can't use the actor.
I feel that an idea would have been to make his death as part of like the story's motivation, or like it's part of this story, not like him just dying randomly of a disease and us moving on of how we react to it.
I think they actually did such a good job of incorporating T'Challa and recipes Chadwick Boseman's actual death into the story. Being the death of a disease was very on the nose, and I was like a little affronted they did it so on the nose. But it is a major factor in how Shuri is processing this information. Again, she's the lab dude. She goes to the lab to solve problems. What is happening when he's on the table in the other room dying, and she's like, where is she at? She's in the lab trying to make it work because like that's who she is. I think taking that from her when she loses him and she's in the lab trying to fix it and she loses him, that's a major part of who she is. She's like, oh wait, like maybe I can't do this in the lab. What happens next? Like her mother sacrifices herself for this girl who they just met. Like again, not really doing it. Ironheart being that figure who's just kind of passive and kind of just following along. She sacrifices herself for this girl. That's a major factor in what Shuri's about to do and who she's about to become. When she first takes the heart-shaped herb, she talks to Killmonger. Like all this stuff is set up. Also, I want to talk about the elemental parallels between Wakanda and what is that place called? What do they call it? I mean, it's called Atlantis, but like, what do they call it themselves?
Pelican?
No, that's him. That's his name.
Telecan.
Yeah, Telecan. So like, water, earth, water, air, wind, and fire. So these guys are all about water and air. If you don't notice, he literally flies around because he swims through the air, but then they'll all go in the water and swim through the water. And that's their 2 elements. When he comes to Wakanda, he always comes from the water. He's never going to walk over land. He can fly to Wakanda, but he doesn't. He always come through the water, like water, and he's air and water. Like the god himself is a flying like lizard thing. So like that's pretty cool. They always do that. And Wakanda being earth and fire, like Wakanda is literally based around the vibranium mountains. So like it's literally earth. But the fire is something they always represent. Killmonger burns their heart-shaped herb. When she gets mad in her little dream vision and she like expresses herself heavily, fire kicks out everywhere. They burned their robes after the ceremony, like after the funeral ceremony, to help with the passing. Like they do a lot of elemental work throughout this movie, and it's very, very interesting to see them almost be opposed to each other. Even though the elements they're using themselves are almost opposing. Very interesting, very interesting, very interesting. I think the beginning of the movie does a lot of times setting all this up, and that's why some of these scenes that aren't action-packed are very drawn out. You said in the beginning that the fight scenes were kind of like whatever, lackluster. I do actually agree with you. I think I've seen much, much better choreographed fights than the MCU. I think that it's more, again, like the Game of Thrones thing, like two characters getting into a fight, you're waiting for the outcome. You're waiting for, all right, who's about to lose this? Because the outcome is very relevant to how the story progresses. So like the fighting itself, I feel like they didn't put a lot of effort. Excuse me, that's not fair. They definitely didn't put as much effort into.
I think they cut out. I feel they cut out
that.
because they ran out of time. So I feel they cut out the scenes. That's what happened.
It's a lot of because there's so many different fights that happen. Well, actually, I will say the Okoye bridge fight was gas. That was crazy. She was fighting for her life in there. I was so scared for her in there because I was like, okay, well, Black Panther's gone. Like it's easy, you know what I'm saying? It's very easy to kill off a main character right quick and have the audience distraught the rest of the movie. Queen Ramonda. Also didn't see that coming. Did not see that coming. If you saw that coming, you're a mind reader. You're from the future. Did you know she was about to die? Did you see that coming?
No,
bro.
No.
And by the way, I love the 50-50 rule. Whenever you have a luck in your movie and it's both 50-50, at least one of them has to be a failure.
Yeah,
and that's what happened. Because
she lost twice in this movie. She lost her brother and then her mother in the same sequences. Not a good look for Shuri.